Good morning, everyone. It is 10 a.m., so we're going to get started here. It is Monday, July 6th. My name is Katie Carter. I'm the emergency response meteorologist with the National Weather Service. And I apologize. Typically, you get the slides in your inbox at least a few minutes before this live briefing on Mondays, but there was a lot to catch up on from the holiday weekend and still kind of a lot going on. So I promise you will get the slides, but instead of the back-to-back emails of the slides and then the recording, you'll just get one email with everything at once. And that will be coming out pretty soon after we are finished here. So we are getting a little bit of a break from the heat, at least for a few days, but we are more concerned about the flooding threat. So starting things off, you see everyone shaded in green here, roughly the eastern half of the Commonwealth under a flood watch, and that is until late tonight. We are keeping the flood risk, however, at least through today and tomorrow, and then also reintroducing a severe weather threat as well. One other thing that I did want to mention is that the Wakefield radar is still down. There's a significant mechanical issue, and we have some specialty technicians on their way, but they are coming from our radar operations center in Norman, Oklahoma, and they aren't going to get here until Tuesday. So, really, midweek is probably the earliest if we're being real about getting this back up online. However, we did make it through the weekend with all of the severe weather, and we're able to rely on our surrounding radars. So, of course, it's an impact to us, but we can still work around this. But it is something to be mindful of. So, getting a closer look at those flood watches. Again, it's roughly Albemarle County and points eastward under the flood watch until about midnight tonight. So, not everyone in this area is going to be seeing rainfall, but those that do, the thunderstorms are going to be really heavy rainmakers. We're looking at probably 1 to 2 inches of rainfall for those that do see rain and localized higher amounts. Some of you could be clocking in closer to that 3 to 4 inch rainfall, especially if you get hit with back-to-back thunderstorms. All of that being said, even though the western part of the state is not under a flood watch, that does not mean that they're not getting rain. And it also doesn't mean that they couldn't get flooding. It's just that the chance is not quite as great storm coverage wise. There's going to be a lot less activity out that way. So it's just not going to be as great of a chance. But we are looking at the chance for isolated to even scattered flash flooding, especially in urban low-lying areas where there's poor drainage, that kind of thing. One thing that we do like to look at is those specific areas that have low flash flood guidance. So this that you see here is our 1 hour flash flood guidance. And I circled 4 specific locations where it is much lower than other parts of the state. So we have as low as 3/4 of an inch up to 1.5 inches in some of these spots. So that includes for Northern Virginia, DC, and just our metro area surrounding there. Portions of Shenandoah have pretty low flash flood guidance here as well. The Metro Richmond area, luckily this does not include Petersburg just because of the flood threat that we do have in the Tri-Cities area, but that is certainly a possibility that we still need to keep a close eye on. But Richmond, Henrico, portions of Hanover, your flash flood guidance is anywhere from 1.5 up to about 2 inches of rain, or maybe even a little bit less than that. That is really easy to do with these thunderstorms in the course of just 1 hour. I mean, we're talking torrential rain. So that is something to really keep an eye on. And then Southwest Virginia, although they are not under that flood watch, notice that they are still under a pretty low flash flood guidance. A lot of the counties out that way have just 1 to 1.5 inches for flood conditions in 1 hour. Now, as I mentioned, we're looking at less storm activity in Southwest Virginia, but still a few thunderstorms are possible. So even though you're not under that flood watch, this is why I wanted to show you that product to show that even one thunderstorm could cause localized flash flooding, not widespread. Sticking with the flooding theme, I wanted to just give you that bigger picture for the next few days. So there is a slight risk for excessive rainfall for just about the area under the flood watch, maybe a little bit greater than that under that slight risk, but but the marginal risk extends for the rest of the state. Tomorrow, we have a marginal risk for flooding. And I will say, though, I was chatting with some of the meteorologists at the local offices, and we all think that the later on today, this is very likely to be upgraded, at least part of the state, central and eastern parts of the state, to a slight risk, because the conditions are just about nearly the same tomorrow as what we're expecting today for the setup. So it would not surprise us at all if this marginal risk does get increased to a slight risk, at least for a part of the state tomorrow. So watch out for that. Wednesday, we do still have some storm chances in the forecast, although it's not nearly as widespread. And at this point, we're not looking at flash flooding, but many chances for rain in the week ahead, which, as we know, with a drought, we absolutely need, just maybe not as fast and, obviously causing issues if we're seeing flash flooding. So it kind of is what it is, but at least it will help us out, hopefully, in the drought side of things. So today's rainfall really picks up, especially later this afternoon and evening. I would say it's actually a little bit more of a later evening type of an event. A lot of times we start to see 2, 3, 4 o'clock, the activity really start to ramp up. And we'll see some thunderstorms developing around that time, but it really starts to blow up in coverage, with a lot more coverage around the state around dinner time. So 5, 6, 7 o'clock into the later evening hours. That's when things really start to get going. And we've been talking so much about the flood threat with these storms that we haven't even touched quite yet on the severe piece. So we know that they're going to be heavy rainmakers, and you'll notice along and east of 95, the heaviest rainfall, anywhere from 1.5 up to 2.5 inches possible. But we also are under a slight risk for severe storms as well. So aside from just the flooding threat, we could be seeing some strong winds that lead to wind damage, maybe some tree limbs down, or even power outages. And that is luckily the only other threat with these. We're not looking at tornado threat or even hail, but it's a wind and a flooding type situation for a lot of the Piedmont and I-95 corridor. Going ahead and looking at tomorrow, maybe not quite as great of a flood threat, but still elevated nonetheless. We're looking at measurable rainfall for a good part of the state. You'll see through the afternoon and evening hours a lot of pretty high probability of precipitation noon and beyond through the evening hours. So we really start to ramp up and get into the 70 to 90% chance for rain and thunderstorms through the evening. And then the right side of your screen shows the probability of thunder. So that is not quite as great tomorrow, but it is still going to be active with showers and thunderstorms. Tomorrow's severe weather potential also not quite as great. We're under a marginal risk. That's a category 1 or level 1 out of 5, but isolated wind damage could still be possible with tomorrow's thunderstorms as well. The timing I mentioned of tonight's storms is a little bit later in the late afternoon and late evening. Tomorrow's is more of our typical summertime pattern, with about 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. for tomorrow's storms. And then Wednesday, we talked about this not being a flood threat, at least as of right now. Still a few chances for showers and thunderstorms on Wednesday afternoon, but right now it's looking a lot more isolated and not nearly as widespread as today and tomorrow. I didn't even mention heat because we don't have any heat alerts out like we did over the weekend. We don't have any heat advisories or extreme heat warnings, which we are thankful, but heat is still going to be a factor in this week's forecast. So today, certainly hot. We're looking at highs in the 90s, low 90s for most of central and eastern Virginia, but the heat index is going to be right at or just below advisory criteria. So it's still going to be hot. Heat index values well into the 90s and low 100s for a good part of the state. Now, the showers and storms brought to us by a cold front, so will actually bring a little bit of relief from the heat and humidity. And when I say a little bit, I really mean it, just a little bit. It's still going to be feeling like the 90s and low 100s, both Tuesday and Wednesday. But in the longer term, Thursday, Friday, and into next weekend, I will say the heat does return. So we could be looking at heat advisory criteria returning again on Thursday. And that's why I wanted to put this into context, showing heat risk, Now, we don't have any of the extreme on the map like we did over the weekend, so that's good news. But we do still see a lot of moderate and major. And remember, this is a heat risk that is it takes a lot of different things into consideration: the heat, the time of the year, how long it's going to be that hot, all those kind of things. So it's still moderate to major for most of the state today. This shows that we back off the heat tomorrow, but then I really wanted to make sure that I put the dates on here so that you could see that I kind of skipped a few days. So the left side of your screen is tomorrow, showing that we back off the heat. But then I wanted to show Friday to show you that Thursday and Friday we return with the heat, and you'll see the moderate and major impacts coming back to the state. And it shows the impacts likely to our health systems. We'll see an increase of heat-related illnesses coming into urgent cares, that kind of thing. One other recap for our precipitation for the first half of the week. You'll notice that there is a heavy load on the first half of the week, so a good amount of measurable rainfall, especially for our Piedmont locations, Shenandoah, I-95 corridor, and areas east, with today and tomorrow's storm threat chances. And then the rainfall forecast, although certainly not dry for the second half of the week, it is going to be not nearly as active as you see there. One good thing is our tropics are looking pretty nice. The National Hurricane Center not tracking anything. And I will say I was up early looking at all of the different ensemble models to kind of get a peek farther into the future than the National Hurricane Center likes to, put out their discussions, and I don't see anything that we need to keep an eye on, at least for the short term. So that's good news there. And then this graphic here just shows you the heat index, how we kind of get a break from that extreme heat tomorrow and Wednesday, and then it returns for Thursday and Friday. And also good news, our probability for precipitation. Because of the drought, we have a kind of heavy emphasis on the first half of the week, as we mentioned, Monday through Wednesday. But the rain and storm chances still continue and linger through the later part of the week and even into the weekend as well. And that's just the 7-day precipitation forecast. So I will leave you with this last graphic showing you that mid-range heat is expected to stay around normal to maybe slightly above normal. And then it does look like the mid to end of July 13th through the 19th. Right now, we're in a period of above average precipitation. It looks like we'll slide back into the near normal, what we typically see for this time of the year for that duration. So I know that was a lot going on, but our main headlines for the week are flooding, potential for severe weather, and of course, that lingering heat. If you have any questions, I'll stick on for another few minutes. Otherwise, have a great week. If there are any updates that we need throughout the week, we will certainly send you email updates, and don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks so much again. Have a great week.